Very good morning to you, Sam. This is a really interesting initiative. Just give us a couple of more details about what you and others are planning.
Yeah, so I'm not a member of the Welsh Government here in Wales, obviously. So it's a Welsh Government initiative looking to put £30 million towards tackling homelessness, and obviously any sort of funding to tackle homelessness is welcome. But I think what we are looking at, though, is a sticking plaster over what is a significant issue for many people here in Wales. And actually what the government is not doing is tackling some of the fundamental issues which are causing homelessness, such as it's basic things like not enough houses being built here in Wales. We've had decades of nowhere near enough houses being built in Wales, and now we're seeing some of those symptoms coming out where people are just struggling to get on the housing ladder.
Indeed, but how big a problem? Because obviously, we have to differentiate, don't we, between people who unfortunately end up sleeping on the streets and homelessness, because they are two different categories, aren't they? How big a problem is homelessness in Wales?
Well, according to the Welsh Government figures, they say that in recent times, over the pandemic, around 15,000 people have experienced homelessness in its broader definition. So there obviously are some challenges for a relatively small country here in Wales. At 15,000 people over the pandemic have been registered as being homeless. So there are issues, and there is a need to tackle that. £30 million to support the private rental sector is probably not the worst idea in the world, but it's not a silver bullet. There are fundamental underlying issues, a significant one of which, is not enough houses being built. You have to ask, Darren, why are developers moving out of Wales? Why are developers no longer seeing Wales as a place to build houses? Why is it they see Wales as perhaps an unwelcome place for houses to be built? And you look at, I don't normally look to Scotland for policy, but they've got a housing policy or a housing strategy up to 2040. So they're looking decades ahead as to how are they going to make sure there's a right number of houses for the residents that they serve. We're not seeing that same sort of thing here in Wales. It's a short-term thinking, and yes, there are some short-term solutions that need to be put in place. What we really need is a strategy which tackles housing in the long run here in Wales.
Well, many people would say, and we know that housing, for example, housing stock in England, I think there were fewer houses built in England last year than the government's target, which is around 250,000. This is not necessarily a party political thing. What people would say potentially the solution to this is more social housing, is going back to what we used to do in this country in the 50s, 60s and 70s.
Yeah, we certainly support some social housing. Actually, this is about having appropriate housing, because it's what's appropriate for people who need it. So there is a need perhaps for some social housing. There's also a need for, of course, affordable private housing, as well as there's need for housing which are appropriate for an older an ageing population, and perhaps those with disabilities as well. So what we really need is Welsh Government to come forward with a housing strategy which looks at what is appropriate housing for the needs of the people that we serve here in Wales. Yes, some of that is social housing, but there's lots of different types of housing which is needed, and not just a short-term plaster over a wound at the moment.